Welcome to episode 2 of Just Joshing, a DC Hoop show. Thank you, first of all, to everybody who showed love to episode 1. That was a great way to kick off. Episode 2, I'm very happy to announce we got Tre Haliburton as the guest, a huge veteran of the Wizards beat. He's been around for a while, very established. So, Troy, say what's up to the people.
Hey man, how you doing? Thanks for having me, Josh. I was very honored to have you ask me to come on your podcast. It's amazing to see the Wizards feet growing, and I very much respect your work. So let us give the people what they want with a great conversation today.
Yes, sir. Well, the Wizards have given us plenty to talk about. As it's only been 3 games, but they're 1-2, and the one win was a very unexpected one against the Dallas Mavericks, right? And the way they won it was the most interesting way, was the most interesting kind of talking point about the game, because Kyshawn George was driving that win. And he drove it in a way that it wasn't just like a good game. It was kind of an all-NBA performance, right? This guy was dominating on both ends of the floor. He was looking like a guy you could build around. And that's the first question I want to lead off with. Could Kyshawn George be the guy that at least one of the guys the Wizards built around, or is he going to be more of a complementary piece when the team's actually contending? What say you?
Hey, as a guy who's been on the Kyshawn George bandwagon since last season, and especially over everything that I heard about him this summer, and being able to watch him play in both Summer League and the America, I've gone out on the limb, publicly before and said that I believe that Kyshawn George will ultimately be the best young Wizards player of their young group. And so the things that I saw in that game against the Dallas Mavericks, I don't really think it's that much of an aberration. Like, he's really a guy who has expanded his skill set in such a way that I think that he's going to be an impactful player in the NBA for a long time. And like I said, especially with the fact that he plays a position of real need in the NBA, that 3-and-D wing position is kind of like the most valuable kind of position in the NBA right now. And so with his skill set, this is a guy who can come out there, he can shoot the basketball. I've been very impressed with his ball handling. His handle is a lot tighter this year than it did last season. And he has what I believe to be very good secondary playmaking skills. And so I know a lot of people want to see him playing point, and maybe he can get to that level. But, I think that he's shown a lot right now, and I think that he's on a very good trajectory, and that's a very good sign for Wizards fans.
Yeah, I like what you said, how he plays at such an important position as a 3-and-D wing guy. And it's kind of crazy because, he kind of came into the league. 3-and-D was kind of his MO, right? But Now he's just doing everything. I mean, I don't think you could point a weakness to this guy's game. The only thing is that can he do it on a nightly basis, right? We saw last night against Charlotte, he still had a decent game, right? 6 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, but it just wasn't as loud as Dallas, where he had 34 points, right? I think 11 boards and a few assists. So, he didn't stuff the stat sheet, but he still contributed. So against Charlotte, he's kind of more of a role player. Against Dallas, he was a superstar, all NBA looking guy. So it's like, which one are we going to get? You know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest question. But go ahead.
No, I think that that's just a part of the learning curve of young players in the NBA, that trying to find a level of consistency. And so, I think that more times than not, we're going to get, somewhere closer towards that guy who played in Dallas. But, there are going to be games where you're not going to, where the ball simply just isn't going to go in the basket. But, I love how you, like you said, he was filling out the stat sheet and the rebounds and assists, and he was doing other things to contribute to help the team try to win the game. And so, I think, like I said, there's going to be ups and downs with his shooting. But, I think that, he's in a very good spot right now for, just for his growth and development as a basketball player.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on with that, because the fact that this guy's 21 years old, he's just starting his second season, and he's already easily one of the best players on the team. And he's probably the most complete player, because if you're just looking at his talent-wise, not just on a game-to-game basis, but just talent-wise, there's nothing he can't do. I don't think he has too many blind spots other than just being that guy on a daily basis, because against Charlotte, he's one of the better rebounders and passers, even when he didn't have a big scoring night. there are the nights where Dallas where he can have a big scoring night. So I think that shows you that this guy is going to be a key pillar of this rebuild. And that's great because he wasn't even drafted in the lottery, right? The Wizards traded up to get him at number 24 last season. And it just kind of shows you, this new front office is really not new anymore, but the front office that's been there since 2023 is really showing their worth, in my opinion. Do you agree with that statement?
No, of course. I definitely agree with that statement. And, I think that this kind of goes into the strategy that, Michael Winger and Will Dawkins are having, where you want to get as many bites at the apple as possible. And so, yeah, when you have, we had 3 first-round draft picks last year. We had 2 first-round draft picks this year, and plus Jameer Watkins in the second round. We're going to keep. We went out and signed or traded for Cam Whitmore. So we had other guys who were first-round draft picks for other teams on this roster. Like, you want to get as many bites at the apple as possible. You want to get as many chances as possible so that, you can put yourself in the best position to get 2 or 3 quality NBA players out of that. And if they're able to do that, then their strategy would be, I would deem, successful.
Yeah. And I think it's like you were saying, they're just getting a lot of bites at the apple. You know what I mean? And Will Dawkins even said in his preseason presser, not everybody's all these guys are going to be on the team forever. But as long as you can get a few key pieces out of all these picks and moves and trades you're doing, I think you're in great shape because you're getting guys on the cheap that you're developing while they're young, right? It's not like expensive contracts. Like, in the last front office, they had that Bradley Beal deal that was crazy, right? And now they don't have that issue anymore, right? Their books will be clear next offseason. And they're in a great position financially and talent-wise going forward. Now they just have to keep building that on that pillar they're doing, right? Next year that they'll have prospects like Darren Peterson maybe to choose from. We'll see what pick they get, but then they'll have free agency and trades as well. So you add guys like Kyshawn and we're going to talk about Tre Johnson to that mix. I think they're in great shape.
No, for sure. I think especially when you really look at the fact that, okay, they have the optionality to really go in any direction. Because they have the salary cap, they could use that salary cap space to go out and sign players. They could use that salary cap space to, trade for players, trade some of their expiring contracts and bring on some, future long-term money. But the biggest thing that I think, like I said, is the fact that they have optionality. Like there are different paths that they can take. And, one of the best things is the fact that, that they are committed to the youth movement. And, one of the things I did in preparation for this podcast, when I was looking at I know it's just a small sample size, but 3 games, when you look at the Wizards top scores for the year, they're all of their, young guys from the last 2 drafts. Kyshawn leads the team in scoring at 20 points a game, Tre Johnson at 17, and Alex Sarr at 15. So like that, if you can, have optionality moving forward, and you have your young guys who are really, carrying the bulk of the load as far as scoring the basketball, I don't think that there's much more that you can ask for as far as, going through this rebuild process.
Yeah, and speaking of the guys you just mentioned, right? Obviously, Kyshawn is showing great signs earlier too. But that's not all with this team. Tre Johnson, right? Number 6 overall pick from this past draft. He's already a good scorer off the bench and as an NBA player. It's only 3 games in. He's already a valid 6th, 7th guy. He's already shown that. It's 3 games in. He's 19 years old, right? His jumper's butter. What's your kind of thought process with Tre Johnson here so far?
I love what I'm thinking. I think that he's very much lived up to the billing that, we were kind of sold on as far as what he was as a basketball player coming into this season. The thing that I've been most impressed by is that how easy it looked for him to, kind of score the basketball. And I'm even more impressed by the fact that the coaching staff has, to me, gone out of their way to put him in the best possible position to succeed. So, they're really running pin downs and sets. They're running floppy sets. They're running horns and stuff for him to get him, in movements and get him movement in his space so that, he can do what he does, which is knock down that jump shot.
Yeah, it's amazing, right, to see someone on this Wizards core who shoots and scores so easily, right? It's kind of like, last couple of years, that hasn't been the case, right? I mean, they've had a lot of guys that have, potential in offense, like more defensive heavy guys like Koulibaly and Sarr. but the jumper just wasn't at this level with those guys, right? And now you add Tre to the mix, and that was something they sorely needed. It was such a good pick, especially right considering that how sad it was for the fan base to get number 6 on the lottery night, right? And everyone wants Cooper Flag, everyone wants Dylan Harper. Tre Johnson, everyone liked Tre Johnson, but Flag and Harper were kind of the headliners, and now Johnson is doing almost as good as any other rookie in the league right now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think like with Tre, it's just really interesting to see like how smooth his jump shot is. And it's like, so I'll give you an example for example, like Corey Kispert, who's also on the Wizards. He's a known shooter, but like he shoots like a different type of shot. Like he kind of shoots more like that line drive, like kind of going straight into the basket. Like whereas Tre's jump shot is like it's so smooth. Like I'm almost more surprised when his jumper doesn't go when he shoots. Like
no, I totally agree. When you watch it, I mean, it's sort of hard to describe. You just kind of got to watch it. It's like with his form and the way it rolls out of his hand. It's just beautiful. It's like art watching it.
it's a beautiful jump shot. I got like, and it's got good rotation and spin on it. Like his game is very aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the big topics with Tre going into the season was how he was like, yeah, I don't have hobbies. I just hoop, And, that everyone's kind of like, even like Will Dawkins and even, some other vets on the team were like, hey, like, you might want to look into some other hobbies. Like you might get overwhelmed. And it's funny. It's like, they're right. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, hey, it's working for him so far. You know what I mean? So, I think he can grow at his own pace in that respect. But yeah, I don't think the Wizards could have asked for anything more out of his first 3 games, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think that's like super abnormal for a really young guy to he likes playing video games, to playing basketball. Like yesterday, like that's like pretty normal, like 18, 19-year-old behavior.
Right. Then going forward with Tre, he hasn't started yet. It's only 3 games in, right? Obviously the rotation's going to be crowded, especially when Coulibaly comes back. But do you have kind of a guess on when he'll start or when he'll get even more minutes than he's getting now?
I'd say that. I mean, it really just kind of depends on what happens with CJ. And, I know that we're probably going to talk about, how he's looked so far. But, I think that it's probably the right move to start CJ at the beginning of the season because he's a veteran and, it's just easier logistically for everybody else around to have him in the starting lineup. But if he continues to play like this, I think that Tre Johnson should probably be moving into the starter lineup sooner rather than later. I really think that they want to take their time with his development and, that everything will happen at its own pace. But like I said, like the fact that whether he starts or comes off the bench, I really have been impressed with the fact how they've utilized him and him playing, 26 to 28 minutes a night. Like he's still playing almost, starters minutes, so, and what did they always say? The most important is not how he started the game, how he finished the game. So as long as he's in those, in those critical crunch time moments and getting those opportunities, I'm not really as caught up as much as, when is he going to start?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I was just looking at their stats so far. He's second on, like you said, he was second on the team in scoring with 17 points per game so far. This guy is just starting in the NBA. I mean, can you imagine when he's getting better even this season and then starting hitting his prime? I mean, this guy could approach 30 a night. I wouldn't be surprised. You know what I mean?
I mean, look, it's giving Devin Booker.
Right? It's giving Devin Booker. Yeah, that is a great slogan for the fan base right now. I think, that this team hasn't had anything close to Devin Booker offensively in a minute. So I think that's very exciting. Now, kind of staying on the rotational topic, right? I kind of mentioned already. Bilal's been out with a thumb injury, but he should be back within the next couple of weeks, right? And I think in a couple of these games, especially against Charlotte and against the Bucks too, both games they lost, you really notice how much they missed him on the defense on the outside, right? They just don't have a lot of point of attack guys, right? So go ahead.
No. I mean, the way LaMelo Ball did it yesterday, we definitely need Bilal back out there. Like, yeah, he is our defensive stopper, and I think that with him not being out there, it really does affect our defensive presence. And so, and also like the thing that also people really don't realize, but like Bilal was the first draft pick of the new regime.
Yep.
So like they are going to be so heavily invested in making sure that they don't look stupid. They want him to be successful. And so, I can't wait for him to come back. And I know that, that he's going to get plenty of opportunities, number one, because he's the best defender on the team. So he's going to play regardless, of whether they start him or bring him off the bench. But I think the biggest thing is just kind of looking to see how his offensive game has developed. And, if he can continue to grow in that realm. But yeah, no, I cannot wait for him to get back. And we clearly see how much they need him for his perimeter defense on this team.
Yeah, it's so on point because I think when he comes back, you're going to see it won't be as easy for teams to just dominate outside, right? The way that it's been pretty much over the first 3 games. Obviously, one guy can't change everything, but Bilal's got so many compliments around the league already from the biggest stars. Like, this guy's an amazing defender, right? And so if he can just figure out his jumper, he's kind of the opposite of Tre Johnson, right? Like, Tre Johnson has an amazing jumper, not much on defense yet. But Bilal, amazing defender, because jumper's been his issue, right? So if he can nail that down this season, I think it's gonna be another exciting piece for the Wizards.
No, for sure. Like, I mean, when you really think about like how the roster is constructed, like we shouldn't be relying on, Buck Carrington and CJ McCollum as defensive stoppers going out there trying to guard, opposing teams like explosive guards. Like, so that really puts like a lot of, I wouldn't say pressure, but it makes Bilal's role on the team a very much needed one.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of ironic, right? Because he's been out, but this time out has kind of shown you that they need him even more so maybe than if he was playing, because it's like, okay, if he was playing, you can kind of take him for granted, like, okay, yeah, we know he's a good defender, but it's like, oh, now that he's gone, like, we need his defense, right? So yeah, that's kind of an interesting development, I would say, so far. But speaking of defense, Alex Sarr, right, that was his kind of calling card coming into the league. But the offense, it wasn't very efficient as a rookie, right? He kind of missed a lot of jumpers. He shot about like 31% from the 3-point line as a rookie. Now he's not shooting too many threes. He's living around the rim. He's being a true 7-foot big. What do you say about that?
I love it. I've been clamoring for him to, play like he's actually 7'1". And, one of the things that I was talking with people around the league last year, but the people were concerned about his lack of dunks last season as a 7'1" guy. And then he's come out this year and he's gotten a dunk, I believe, in every game so far this year, which is, a marked improvement from what he was on last season. And just like you said, I think that his just overall shot selection has improved so much. And that right there is just going to make him a much more efficient basketball player.
Yeah, and it's like, Alex, I think he's probably the most different player, I would say, for guys that were in the team last season and now through his first 3 games. I think he's the guy who's clearly adjusted the most, just in terms of how he played back then versus now, right? And I think, again, he's only starting his second season, very young guy. And it just shows you that this Wizards development process is working, right? Now, they're still got a lot to improve on, right? They're very inconsistent still. Like, the defense is very up and down. But when you look at the individual pieces, Alex Sarr is one of the ones that's like, okay, this guy has already revitalized his whole playing style, right? He's being more physical. And there's still moments where you can see, he sometimes he'll still fade away when a guard is guarding him, stuff like that. Like, he still can impose himself even more, but it's night and day compared to last season.
Yeah, and you're right. I think there are some instances where you're like, oh man, you got a smaller guy on him. Like, we'd like to see him be a lot more aggressive. But I think some of that is just going to come with his body growing and developing. And so, like, as he gets older and as his body grows and, he becomes more physically imposing, then I think that, it'll be a lot easier for him to take advantage of those mismatches on smaller players. And then, yeah, that's on the offensive end. And then on the defensive end, like, we're talking about a guy who, he probably has an ability to reach a level of defensive prowess that like not a lot of people in the NBA aren't going to be capable of, just because he's a guy who can actually defend the rim and competently switch out on smaller defenders. Like people who are able to do both, like really don't come around that often. And like the handful of guys that you can name in the NBA are like that, like are all like all-star caliber players, all defensive caliber players. And so if he can just continue to be the man on that end, and then we'll take whatever we can get on the offensive end to add to that. But he really has a chance, I believe, to be a very special defender in the modern NBA.
Yeah, I love what you said there. How all the guys that have those skill sets are some of the best players in the league, right? I think guys like Giannis and
Wemby,
Wemby. I was gonna say, yeah, those guys where it's like
tough to be able to do both. Like most
right.
guys who are like shot blockers defending the rim, like you would never want them, Vic, you would never want Brook Lopez, getting switched out onto, Tyrese Maxey. Like that's just not good.
Yeah.
But Alex Sarr is a guy who could actually head the pick and roll, and like I'm not saying that he can, pick up point guards full court, but he can move those puppies a little bit and stay in front of some of these smaller guards. And like I said, like that, just to have that dichotomy of being able to do both, like really would make him a special basketball player.
Yeah, and we were talking about how Key being a special two-way guy, kind of doing a little bit of everything. Alex can be kind of the big man version of that, right? Because if he's dominant in the paint on both ends of the floor, right, and he can still shoot a little bit, right? It kind of gives you everything you'd want out of your franchise center, right? I mean, especially in today's NBA, they're more versatile, right? It's like we were saying just now, guys can also they can protect the rim, but they can also switch onto guards and things of that nature. Just have more of a wide skill set. So, I mean, what else could you want out of the guy, right?
I mean, yeah, like I love one of my favorite things that I love, like just watching him play, is when he can get the rebound and push it up the floor himself, and then use that to create a fast break. Like that is actually like a thing of beauty, just being able to watch him like a deer. Like he's just so long, limbs everywhere. But like that's another thing that like there are not a lot of people in the NBA are capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, think of guys like, right, kind of the more classic center, like, I don't know, Gobert or Steven Adams, right? Those kind of defensive guys. Those guys are not going to push the ball off the floor on a one-man fast break like that, right? You know what I mean? But Alex Sarr could do that because
Turner never ended.
Right? But Alex Sarr has the athleticism to do that because he's just kind of part of that new school where they kind of do it all, right? So I think Alex Sarr is another piece where that's worth getting excited about, especially after the Charlotte game in particular. They're still kind of being careful with his minutes because of his ankle injury, but he was shooting the lights out a little bit. He had that buzzer beater three, right? He was kind of all over the place, and it was kind of cool to see that because it's like it feels like everyone on this Wizards team could have a big game on a given night, especially for the young core. Right.
Yeah. No. Like I love what I've seen from him so far, and I'm glad that you brought up the injury and how he's on the minutes restriction. And I really am appreciative of the Wizards for being overly cautious with him, especially when you think about how many times over the last year we've seen these calf injuries and people rush back from them and then you end up with an Achilles tear. So like the fact that he was able to start the season on time, that's great, like for the Wizards, for him to be able to go out there and develop. But I'm glad that they're being cautious because we're not trying to make the finals this year. So like we have to be thinking about our long-term future in mind when we're making decisions like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And speaking of the long-term future, right? Obviously, this rebuild is definitely in full swing, right? The front office came in a couple of years ago. And you're seeing the results of the process, right? This is the best roster, the team's had since the new front office came in. How do you feel about where they are at this point, right? I mean, it's kind of the ultimate question about this team.
Yeah, I feel like they're exactly where they're supposed to be at this point. I know that a lot of people were kind of wishing that, the rebuild would be a little bit further along than what it is. But I mean, the Wizards, like we talked about earlier, we just haven't had the lottery luck to, put themselves in that position. So based on, the cards that they've been dealt, like I think that they are exactly where they're supposed to be. And so, and then especially the biggest thing about the Wizards this season is the fact that, they still have that top 8 protected draft pick from the John Wall trade that's still kind of hanging over their heads. So, it's like, even if in the ideal world, even if, they were developing, you don't want to finish, 12th or 13th this year and give away a lottery pick. That just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So, they're really kind of, constricted to finishing in that and one of the bottom 4 or 5 teams in the league so they can protect themselves and keep that pick. And, I think the biggest thing that they're focusing on is not so much as the winning games aspect, but just the true essence of player mental development.
Yeah, and that's the thing with that top 8 protected pick, right? It's funny because considering how the lottery has gone, if it weren't for that pick being the top 8 protected, and if it was just a regular pick, I'd say, just go out there and play and don't worry about losing enough games, right? Because, I mean, you saw the Mavericks get number 1. They barely missed the playoffs. They were in the play-in, right? And it's like, so that part is like a little bit unlucky that it's protected, but it's not the end of the world, right? Because at the end of the day, this team is still early enough where they're not worried about contending yet. And there's a lot of great prospects at the top of the next draft, right? I was saying earlier, Darren Peterson, Dybonsa, Cameron Boozer, right? I think any of those guys could be the guy along with Kyshawn and Tre, right? So, if they get a little more lucky this next time, get top 3, you add that to what they've already got, and make some more moves for some more vets. I think they're in a sweet spot, man.
No, for sure. They're definitely in a sweet spot. And, even if they don't get, the lottery luck that they need, like we'll take a number 5 pick, right? You know what I'm saying? Instead of giving away a pick, like, I think they're really in just the asset building mode. And, the only way to build is to actually have the assets. So
that's right. And, it's funny because when it comes to assets, right, one of the main ways they've gotten those assets is taking on expensive vet contracts like CJ McCollum, Chris Middleton, right? Guys that, Marcus Smart from before, guys that won't be around on the team for a while, but they contribute with their leadership. They kind of show the young guys the ropes a little bit. And I think you've seen that, with both Middleton and McCollum. And it was good to see McCollum last night kind of have a bigger game. He had about 24 points, right? First couple games were slow for him, but I think, and you've seen Middleton also had a big game in the opener, had 23 points against the Bucks, his former team. So it's good to see those guys pop off a little bit because it shows the young guys, it kind of shows them the ropes, helps them stay in games, but also they could up their trade value maybe at the trade deadline.
Yeah, the Middleton, I really have been impressed by Middleton. Like, number one, just the fact that he made it out of training camp healthy. He started the season healthy. This is a guy who's had, I don't even know how many surgeries on his ankles and stuff over years past. So the fact that he's just out there healthy right now is a great sign for the Wizards. And hopefully, knock on wood, that it can stay like this, going through the season. I'd say that right now, I'd say Middleton has a much, higher chance of being moved at the trade deadline, like than CJ McCollum, just because Middleton has already shown and proven to NBA teams that I can be a rotational player on a championship level team. I know what to do. I can be a secondary ball handler. I know how to defend. I can knock down clutch shots. Like, teams, if you're a team and you're looking for wing depth, you know what you're getting in Chris Middleton. And for CJ McCollum, like, I think that this is a guy who I think that I would say that he is starting to decline as a basketball player. And that's not knocking him, he's 33 years old. Like, that just naturally happens as you get older. But I don't see the same CJ McCollum that I saw, 5 years ago playing with the Portland Trailblazers. Even his last couple of years in New Orleans, really weren't the best years for him. And for me, I think the thing about CJ that is most concerning is the fact that, okay, if he's not scoring the basketball, he's like not proficient enough at all of the other aspects of the game of basketball to not be hitting shots. And so it's like, if he's not hitting shots, then it really becomes like, a liability thing where his minutes might be better Sarr going someplace else.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because like I said, he had about 24 points against the Hornets, but before that, he wasn't doing much. He wasn't hitting much many shots, right? And in the first couple of games, and you kind of saw, right? It's like it kind of felt like Tre was already the better player in those first couple of games, even though it's his first couple
For
of games.
sure. Like to me, TJ, like I'm not like trying to disparage the guy. I'm not trying to like. To me, he doesn't look explosive right now. Like I just am not seeing him like have that that first step quickness and kind of beating guys off the dribble. And so like to me that's a little bit concerning for for because if I've noticed that then like what are the chances that an NBA team is going to be willing to trade for a guy for 30 million who's made $30 million who doesn't have an explosive first step. Like it's definitely a little bit concerning, but hopefully he's like he's in one of those positions where his body will start to feel better as the season goes along and he can kind of get into a groove. But no, I think that there are a little bit of things to be concerned about right now just by watching him play.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how you brought up like kind of how he compares with Chris because I think in my opinion, right, they're both kind of in their twilights, right? But I think Chris has definitely been more consistent, probably, so, than CJ has. And like you said, right, they're still getting their body right. It's only been 3 games, so you got to give him some grace with that, some more time. But I think they're both making a lot. They're on expiring contracts. I think it's going to be hard to get a lot out of them either way. It's just more so like freeing up minutes later on in the season for these young guys that will have more time to get ready for that at that point.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely about, like I said, it's definitely about freeing up minutes, especially with CJ because we have just so many guards, young guards who need to be getting some minutes. It's really going to be interesting to see, like I said, not only like because both of them are on expiring contracts, so it's going to be interesting to see like what the front office values. Like, do they value cap space, or aren't they going to go out and try to what they call around the league pre-agency, where you go out and instead of maybe you go out there, you try to trade for a guy who's going to be a restricted free agent and you use that expiring money to go out and add more long-term money or add, even smaller, draft capital and draft assets like how they did last year with the Marcus Smart trade and which was a very fortuitous decision because, when they made that trade, it was like I think like the 26th pick or something like that, and it ended up being 18. So that was like a good bet going forward on just adding draft capital. And if they can just continue to do like a lot of moves around the margins like that, I think that that's probably the goal that they will go in. But like again, as I said, they have so much optionality; they can really go in any direction.
Yeah, that's a great point you brought up about the Marcus Smart trade. I was talking about with Greg in the last episode, how it's kind of amazing because that's how they got Riley. They're what a number 18 pick outside the lottery, and he's already shown promising signs. He hasn't gotten a lot of minutes, but in the minutes that he's played, he's shown you like, okay, I'm explosive, I could score. You know what I mean? I'm a 6'10" jumbo shot creator. And that's exciting.
Yeah, and it looks honestly, it looks like Kyshawn looked last year, which is a great sign. That kind of he's out there, he's doing things, he can do things with the basketball. He's not scared to shoot. He's taking a lot of he's getting and getting the shots up. I think that as he develops that feel for the physicality of the NBA game, like I cannot wait to see him, start to play, 20 minutes a night.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because this team has so many players where you could say with that about what you just said. Like, I can't wait till they get more minutes. You know what I mean? Like they're showing a lot, and it's like, right, the Wizards got Will Riley, because he basically, they traded for Marcus Smart's deal just for a couple months at the end of last season. And like you said, like you're saying that's a very smart move because now you got this guy who could be a cornerstone, maybe won't be a cornerstone, could be a cornerstone, but he'll be an important piece for you moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. Like like I said, it's really about what the front office values And so, I think, actions speak louder than words. So over time, we'll be able to see, what direction they're going to go in and what they value based on how they move.
And I guess if you could predict, like, on what you just said, is it going to be more of the same moving forward, or are they maybe going to change the way they move a little bit now that they're further along in the rebuild going forward?
I think that it'll be more of the same just because of, the fact that, they're modeling themselves like the OKC of the East. And so I think that's one of the things as a disciple of Sam Presti. I think that, he definitely preaches that patience. And so I don't think that they're going to try to rush any of these steps. I think that they are very much content with where they are right now. And of course, they're always going to be trying to improve and do things on the margins to get better. But I think that there's not going to be a skipping of steps or a rushing of steps. I think that they're exactly where they want to be, and they're going to take their time and be very patient with the whole process.
Yeah, and what you just said is pretty much what this front office has been preaching is, they're not going to skip steps. They're going to be, very meticulous about it. And, I think a lot of it does come down to what picks they get in the lottery, right? Like if they had gotten Cooper Flag this past draft, maybe it would have, they would have been okay with, not worrying about getting another lottery pick, right? Maybe he's just their guy. But, that didn't happen, and that's fine. So, maybe next year they get a higher pick, maybe they don't. But if you could kind of predict, it's obviously impossible to say, but just like what's in your head, right? Like next year after this season, right? Do you see them making a big jump into becoming like maybe, 10 through 7 seed to get into the play-in, or is that still too early?
I'd say it's a little bit too early without it's too early without knowing how they're going to use that $100 million in cap space. And I cannot say,
that's a good point.
They're going to do it like that because like they have $100 million in cap space, and depending on what they do with that money, they could be, a team that will be striving for the play in the end. But, or if they don't use that money, then, that I think that we could be in for another season like this one.
Yeah, it's I was talking about that with Greg too. It's like they're going to have a ton of money under the first apron next offseason, right? I don't see them just sitting on all that, right? They're gonna have to use that for somebody, right? So we don't know who it'll be, but I do think, they cleared the books for a reason, right? They're not just gonna not use it for anything. So depending on what happens with that and who they get in the draft to add to what they've already got, I agree. I think, if everything breaks right, they could be a playing team next year. But if not, that's fine too. Another year, of being a team that doesn't skip steps and, doing their process. So,
yeah. And like I said, I think that, they're preaching how important that the development process is. And so, like that, I think that everyone is so concerned about, how are they going to spend the money or how they're going to get better from the outside when, the true best way that teams get better fast is by internal development. The Oklahoma City Thunder won the title last year because, Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren and Lou Dort and, all these guys that were homegrown, players for them, literally got better from the previous season to last season. And they've shown that they've gotten better even in coming into this season. And so that's what the Wizards want. Like, whether they're competing for playoff spots and stuff next year, they're going to be very patient with this rebuild. And, they're not going to try to force the issue and, and go out and try to skip any steps. Like they're going to take their time. And like I said, the biggest thing is to make sure that the players that are here are getting better. And so, we need to have internal growth and development, in order for the Wizards to get to where they want to be.
Yeah. And that's kind of the whole motto of this organization right now, right? Is internal growth and development to get to where you want to be. That's like you couldn't said it any better. But I
get on the wall.
I think in terms of the pacing of it, that's what can vary based on who they get in the lottery and who they sign and trade for, et cetera, over the next couple of years. So that's the only question. We know they're focused on development, but it's like how fast will it go? How fast will guys like Kyshawn and Alex keep ascending and Tre Johnson, right? And then who will they get in the next draft? Right. How do they fit? And how fast will they start next year? You know what I mean? So it's like, that's the unknown that we're dealing with right now, but we know the general goal, right? It's just the exact timeline of how things will go. We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the fact that you're talking about like the guys who are playing well right now too. But I think that this rebuild will be judged on all of the guys. So like the guys like Bub Carrington and Jameer Watkins and Will Riley, like they're almost just as important as the three young guys who are succeeding already. It's going to be very important for them to for those other guys to establish a baseline level of consistency. And that like I said, OKC wasn't just built off of Shea and Jalen Whitterby. Like they had other role players who are also there, and those guys had to get better on the basketball court. And so I'm very curious as to see what ends up happening with a guy like above Carrington.
Yeah, that last one before we go, right? What Dawkins came from OKC, right? That was, he came under Sam Presti, and now you're seeing that vision being put forth. It's not just a cliche, right? They're really just developing all the young guys they can. And then, the OKC, like I was talking about Greg, they got Hartenstein, they got Alex Caruso from the outside, but that core, right? They got Shea after his first year with the Clippers, right? They developed Jalen and Chet, right? And now you're seeing the result. And with a guy like Bub, right? He might be taking a little bit longer than some of the other guys we mentioned, but that doesn't mean he's dead in the water, right? He's what, 20?
He's 20 years old, and that's the thing. Even for a guy like me, like, and so I've been very vocal about how I don't believe Bub's the point guard, but that doesn't mean I don't think he's a good basketball player. I think that there is a role for Bub Carrington in the NBA for sure. I think at the very least he can be a combo guard, scoring option, off of the bench. But like you said, he's 20 years old. And so, I even have to catch myself, trying to throw, not trying to throw limitations on what he can or cannot do, because, he's still developing as a player, and, he's very young. And so, I know that a lot of people I've been seeing on Twitter over the last couple of days saying, "Oh man, we got killed in the Denny Avdia trade." And it's like, if you watch Denny Avdia play after his first 2 years and after his first year in DC, like there are a lot of people throwing the B word around, and so I think that the Bub is definitely deserving of grace at this point for him to to really kind of find his game. And so for a guy like Sarr and for Kyshawn, I think that they've been the transition has been easier for them because they didn't have such clear defined roles. Like we were saying about with Sarr being that I'm a defensive stopper, I'm a shot blocker, and I can switch. With Kyshawn being a 3-and-D guy who has some playmaking ability. Bub really did. He really isn't, like, you can't put him into a box right now. And so I think that he like will really be the player who over time really kind of has to find himself, find his game. And like you said, he's still very young, and so I still have hope that he can become the player that they envisioned when they traded for him with that draft pick. But there's definitely going to be some growing pains.
Yeah, and real quick before we wrap up, like Bub, it's not like all theoretical. We've seen him have pop out games as a rookie last season, right? He's hit 30 pieces before, so you've seen those flashes. He just has to do it more consistently. So you could say the same about all the young guys. So when it comes to fans like, Bub, whatever, like I'm giving up on him. It's all right. You've seen this guy play well. He just has to do it more. And for a guy like Denny, Denny is a great player for the Blazers right now, but I don't know if Denny would have still been on the team on the Wizards if they kept him by the time that they were like a contending team, right? Based on the timeline. So it wouldn't have made sense.
It's a completely different timeline. Like that's the thing. Like with the Wizards, what's their average age? 22 years old. They're the second youngest team in the NBA. Like, it just that doesn't make any sense to have a guy like Denny, and have him signed up for long years and stuff. By the time, he reaches his prime, like, these guys will, just be finishing up their rookie contracts.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's a good place to end. I think the Wizards' timeline is all matching up right now, right? You know, you guys like Middleton and McCollum won't be around for too long, but they get value while they're here. But you know, all the main pieces will be guaranteed around for a while, right? So I think that's a great place to end. And you know, who knows? Maybe Bub will pop out next game, right? So who knows?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I am very interested to see, what Bub looks like against a good backcourt, a good young backcourt. Because those guys are young, and Tyrese Maxey and VJ Ekholm. Like I said, I still believe in Bub being a quality NBA player. I just think that there's a lot that he has to learn about, trying to be a floor general in today's NBA.
Yes, that's a perfect way to put it. Well, Troy, I really appreciate you coming on. By the way, if you want to, plug in your stuff, go ahead.
Appreciate that, man. Yes, they can always find me on the platform formerly known as Twitter, now at Troy Haliburton. I'm also one of the hosts of the Capitol Hoop Caucus on ESPN 630. We air every Saturday at 10 a.m. and our podcast. We actually just got signed on to do another show during the week, so we'll be having two shows during the week, and the podcast is doing very well. And I also just rebranded my Substack to Capitol Hoop Caucus. We're trying to put it all under one umbrella. So if the people want to find me, they can always find me, like I said, on social media, and definitely try to check out my writings and my musings on the team.
That's beautiful. I didn't know you guys were getting a second show. That's very exciting.
Yeah, no, it is very exciting. That's what happens when you putting your boots on the ground and you're actually, giving the people what they want. And I feel like the radio station, the basketball deserves to be covered at a proper level in this area. And so, we want to make sure that, people have the option to, tune into the radio and actually hear Wizards talks and not just Commanders all day.
Beautiful. Well, I think this Wizards team is giving people a lot to talk about now, and it'll only keep growing moving forward. So that's very exciting. But with that, we'll sign off now. That's episode 2. Thank you, Troy. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Josh. Thank you, bro.